to look into the problems as far as traffic and those who are living on Ruxton and those who are affected by the reopening. So all of those things need to be taken into account as we open. And thirdly, what came to mind was preparing for a probable spike as we start opening. Atlanta, you know, they opened up pretty well, and then they had a spike in COVID cases. And so I think there's a preparation as a town. This is a whole new era that we're living in, making sure that we understand and prepare for future situations like this, the extension of the situation, the ebbs and flows of it all, and being prepared for that, including communication between city council, mayor, the directives with the citizens. So those are the top three for me.
Thank you. Anna Andrews-Mills.
Yeah, I echo much of the same. So keeping citizens safe during this crisis is priority number one, and figuring out how to do that in the best way. I think economic viability and figuring out what the budget looks like as we come out of this crisis is priority number two. And then I heard our actual citizen commenter in the beginning say that communication is important. And I think no matter what the issues are through this crisis and as we go forward, we need to be good communicators both outwardly and be good listeners as those that want to communicate things to us. So here's my list.
And David Armstrong.
Originally, I thought the reason I was so engaged in going to city council meetings and looking at projects was fiscal sustainability and accountability. And obviously infrastructure has been mentioned already, and parking and traffic congestion. But the coronavirus has upended that. And I think there's general agreement among the five of us that that becomes the first overarching priority, both in terms of public safety and the economy, reopening the town. But looking at that specifically, I see, and this is echoing Anna, council's priorities being number one is communication. You need leadership in a crisis, and we get to see positive and negative examples of that right now. Transparency is really important so rumors don't get started and people don't unnecessarily do harmful things. The second thing is I think council has to prioritize, and I think that is the kind of thing that, because so much is unknown about this crisis and about the virus, is you got to be flexible and be willing to change those priorities practically from day to day. Now, one of the things that has encouraged me greatly in the last period of time is the quality of the city staff, from Denise Howell through the department heads and on down, and that makes a huge difference. And for council as the decision makers and city staff as the executors of those policies to prioritize and then take care of the various aspects of the crisis, I think is a second key thing. And at the same time, a third one is I don't want to lose sight of, I'm a master planner, I don't want to lose sight of preparing for the future. And I believe it was Steve mentioned, yeah, with the COG reopening in a year's time, we need to be ready for that. And that ties in directly with many things, but certainly with Hiawatha Gardens and whether or not we are going to build a parking garage, what we're going to do with the existing building. And there is currently a group that is dealing with, I believe Laura Newman has led that for a long time, dealing with Hiawatha Gardens. I don't know that there's a group that's dealing with the COG reopening per se. And then finally, another good example, I think, is the Ruxton corridor, which was mentioned, which relates to practically anything that goes on in Manitou. And I think there could be a group a citizens group who would take the bull by the horns and start addressing the myriad problems that Ruxton faces. So following the lead of council members like Nancy Fortune working on the Creek Trail and on dealing with suggested improvements for Crystal Park Road, that was a very interesting exercise, and I was glad to see how that turned out.
Mr. Armstrong, Mr. Armstrong, I'm sorry, we're at your 3 minutes.
Okay, well, those three things seem to me to be at least three of the top priorities for council.
Well, and we lost Judith Chandler, Councillor Chandler. She's popped on, but she lost her audio. So if you can just hold for a moment while we try and get her back.
Okay, thank you.
I have my audio back, Judy, but I did not hear Anna Andrews Mills' response to this question at all.
I can quickly say it again.
That would be great.
Okay.
So
Works for Mayor.
my belief is that our priority is protecting the citizens during this current crisis, considering economic viability and budget as we come out of the crisis and into the future. And then also I heard our citizens say in the beginning during public comment that communication, no matter what we're doing now and into the future, good communication both from us outwardly is important, and then both listening to those that communicate to us.
Thank you.
All right. So our next question is, what is your definition of serving the people? And we're going to start with Clint Lewis.
Okay, definition of serving the people. To me, it means putting the needs of citizens front and center in all of one's own self-actions when representing the city. It also means helping to create and maintain organized community standards, resources, services that provide each person a stable starting point from which to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. That's what we really want, is a nice, stable society where we can pursue happiness. And we need it to be on an equal footing so that everybody has the same exact opportunity to go after that. There are cases where there's competition for happiness. Unfortunately, that makes things more difficult. For example, the residents of Ruxton versus the incline visitors. There's a little bit of competition for happiness there, I would say. Serving the people means, in this case, participating in the mechanisms of government in order to lead to a policy that's going to work at least somewhat well. Typically, this is done via debate with ample opportunity for the participants to express their point of view and for compromise between the competing parties to occur. When council votes, it sets the current policy, which may and often is revisited and perhaps changed sometimes. An important aspect of serving the people is that there's a known process to resolve the issues. That's the main thing. Thank you.
Okay, and our next is Edie Wilhite.
Yeah, in this capacity as a Ward 3 representative, I think service means to be accessible and communicate with those I represent, knowing what their interests and concerns are, and to be a liaison between them and the council and the mayor. You know, just establishing great communication between them and myself and bringing their concerns to each meeting.
Thank you. Anna Andrews Mills.
Yeah, I really like the term accessibility. I think being available and open to conversations, really listening to what people have to say and enacting to the best of our ability when we make decisions on council as to what the people want and need. Thank you.
Thank you. David Armstrong.
When I think of serving Ward 3, and of course it's not just serving Ward 3, my votes would affect the entire town. I think the key is listen, listen, listen. I had an experience as a young architect the General Fiala in Heidelberg, Germany, sat me and a coworker down, and he focused his full attention on us, and it was a marvelous experience. And I realized after that, a general officer, they can't go out and gather all this information. They have to pay attention to their subordinates to get the information they need to make decisions. And so they tend to be very good listeners. And I took that to heart, and it's benefited me greatly. I do have an open mind when I listen to constituents, residents. I certainly know I don't have all the answer, and I know that I've obviously been wrong often enough to teach me some humility. Ultimately, to me, it comes down to a question of values, including listening and respect. Both my values and what I perceive to be Manitou's values in representing those on council. Thank you.
And Steve Brimner.
This is a real philosophical question, and I appreciate it. I appreciate the answers that were given by the other members as well. I think or the other candidates as well. Thinking philosophically, I think it's important, of course, to communicate, to listen. And one thing that's resonated for me, I heard it in a commencement speech, and it was be a good ancestor. So as we have these public roles, working for the community, working for people, it's important to think towards the future. What's sustainable? Energy, water, and making a life here in Manitou Springs it's good for all the citizens as well as sustainable into the future. There's the Iroquois Nation had one philosophical standpoint. It's think in terms of 7 generations. So 7 generations into the future is what the decisions we're making today. Is that going to be good for them 7 generations into the future? That's it.
Thank you. Okay, are your views on policy compatible with the residents you would be representing? And if not, are you able to make decisions based on what the majority of the residents want versus your personal agenda? And we are going to start with Edie Wilhite.
Yeah, so far, the conversations I've had with my constituents, or the Ward 3 people, are we are all in agreement with the mayor's directives and things like that. So from what I know, we're all in agreement. If it ever comes down to the fact that they might be thinking things differently than me, honestly, I've only been here a year, and I actually think that's a benefit to me because I don't have an agenda. I have a pretty unbiased opinion that I can listen to, everybody who has opinions and take a look at the pros and cons. So I didn't come here with an agenda. I came here to represent the people of Manitou and those that I serve. So I don't feel like it would be a competition between what I desire and what they would want. So, that's it.
Andrews Mills.
Yeah, I think some of my views are probably compatible from the conversations that I've had. Some are probably not, but I consider myself pretty level-headed when it comes to listening to people and understanding their perspective. And if I were to serve on city council, that would be my responsibility, to listen and serve them. And I think that no matter what the future holds or how we continue forward, being able to have those conversations with diverse groups of people and listen to what they have to say will be good. So I think that if we do end up disagreeing at times, the citizens and myself, that I wouldn't have a personal agenda. That's not why I came here. So, thank you.
David Armstrong.
I struggled with this a little bit because there's no way that I can know all of the residents of Ward 3's views. But the short answer is yes and yes. I've lived for 6 years in Ward 3, for 17 years in Manitou. I've been to a lot of meetings, and I've heard a lot of comments from friends and acquaintances and from current and former council members. And one thing you can depend on, I think, in Manitou is if somebody disagrees with you, you will hear about it. You'll find out about it. I don't have any specific axes to grind. And I think one reason I've been successful having my own planning consultancy and in business is that I've learned to rely on knowledgeable people. And there are plenty of knowledgeable people in Manitou Springs, and I talk to them regularly. So I would simply do my best, and I think I'd do a good job of representing the views of Ward 3.
Okay, Steve Brimner.
Yeah, I second David. I kind of struggled with this as well. How can you find out exactly what that balance is, what the majority is? I think that when you do make a decision, or you're talking about making a decision, that people will speak up. Here in Manitou Springs, people will make their voices heard. A good example is when Mayor Mark Snyder wanted to take the Jenkins horse property out here on Ruxton and buy it and turn it into a parking lot at the trailhead below the incline. And people that live on Ruxton, myself included, were just up in arms. Like, we have enough cars coming up Ruxton now. We don't need another parking lot on Ruxton Avenue. And Mayor Snyder listened. And I think I can listen when people speak up and say something that have a different point of view than I have. But I think in general, I'm pretty aligned with the viewpoints of people in Ward 3. That's my gut feeling. So I think it's going to be a good relationship if I'm selected. That's all.
Clint Lewis.
I got a second, Dave, and third, Steve's response as a tough question, because you'd have to know which residents agree with which policies. And regarding the agenda portion of that question, I don't really have this huge personal agenda. So, but to answer that question, I thought about it and I considered the match, which is sort of ongoing right now. And I thought about it this way: as a tax increase was passed by a bare majority in town, but it passed. And leaving aside the role of council in that issue, because there was some stuff that came down, it's clear that serving the people as a whole means respecting the mechanism of government, a democratic vote by citizens to enact the tax. The policy is to enact the tax, and I don't have any problem with that. What comes next is for council to ensure that the tax is properly spent as intended by the folks who initiated the ballot measure. But there's some other folks out there. So an advisory committee is planned, and council has the opportunity to help place a set of applicants on that committee. Anyone in the entire community, regardless of how they felt about the tax, is welcome to apply to be on that advisory committee. So that's kind of how I see that coming down. Thank you.
Okay, next question is to describe a situation when a decision was made you did not agree with, but had to live with. And our first is Anna Andrews Mills.
Yeah. We have a saying actually at work that is disagree and commit. So it's fine to disagree, and it happens fairly regularly at my workplace. One situation in particular is we have a specific metric that we decided is how we would measure success for some of our employees. And I firmly disagree with using a single metric to define the success. But you have to disagree and commit and move forward at some point. And from there, if things play out and evidence suggests that that maybe isn't working well, then you can accumulate new data and have a conversation and perhaps change it in the future. But you have to be willing to work together even if there is disagreement. So, thank you.
Thank you. David Armstrong.
When the short-term rental ordinance was enacted, I didn't like it. First of all, it really restricted my possibility to rent any of my property. There's no chance ever of that. I still don't know if I agree with the 2% of households or the 500-foot distance. But as I looked into it, I realized that a lot of people have had big trouble with short-term rentals, including places like Venice and Barcelona and Paris. And then I realized that Manitou had been very proactive and had done a good job of protecting our housing. And it changed my mind completely. The essence of it is, of this or other issues, is that hey, once it's decided, it's time to accept it and move on. And certainly in council deliberations, accept it and support it and move on. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Brumner.
I've been involved for the last several years in building the trail around Pikes Peak, the Ring the Peak Trail. And I even made a documentary about it a couple of years ago. And recently we've been trying to build about an 8-mile section of trail out on the southwest side by Cripple Creek and Victor. And we even got a grant from GOCO for $100,000. We hired a contractor to go out there and have town hall studies and engage the people, try to figure out how we can make that connection. It's about 8 miles. It goes through some private property, some BLM land, some national forest land, some state land, and so on. And at the end of the day, we gave it the best try, and we really didn't get the solution I wanted. I know where I want the trail to go, and we just couldn't make it happen. People out there in Cripple Creek, Victor area, they value their private property. They don't want people coming back there, by and large. There's some people that did, but not enough of them. We weren't able to make it happen. So we're going forward with a less than optimum solution. And so, I mean, there's nothing I can do about it. It wasn't what I wanted, but we just have to, put our heads down and go forward best we can.
Okay, Clint Lewis.
Yeah, this was actually my favorite question. In 2002, I started a citizens initiative to try to keep the ability of historic homeowners to opt their property out of the historic district. Maybe some of you guys were around for that. We did get that initiative to a citywide vote. We lost. I moved on, but there were two things going on here. Is that a decision was made as a policy. I assume that's what decision means. And I had the opportunity as a citizen to try to do something about it. Just like Steve was able to maybe go after that parking lot at up the Ruxton Avenue. So I'm not sure we have to live with anything. Some things aren't worth fighting for. Another example is kind of my favorite is in 2010, I attempted to get permission to put a shed up on my property that was sort of a fabric shed because I could afford it. The HBC denied the shed, so I appealed it to City Council. And then Councilman Matt Carpenter put his shoe up on the DS, and as if to say, I am putting my foot down that you are not going to build that shed. So I did lose the appeal, but the following week I contacted Matt because we had been talking about the website stuff, and we began working together on that website. So I think I'm pretty good at moving on. The letter by Dave Wolverton that got read into the record last week is an example of how a citizen can keep things in the public mind and influence people. I've worked with Mr. Wolverton way back there, Save the Flats, I think it was, and I think he was actually on this HBC thing we did. So I'm really glad to see that he's still active in doing that sort of thing. Thank you.
Edie Wilhite.
Yeah, the first thing that came to my mind when I thought about a time where I had to live with a decision that wasn't really mine, years ago, I was chosen by HBO to be part of a documentary series. And I worked with a director in New York and in LA. And it was a movie or a documentary they put together, and it was following 3 families, including mine, where the children were struggling with mental illness. And it was a very important project because it was raw, it was real, and it ended up winning the Peabody Award. But when we signed up for it, they didn't tell us what the title of the documentary was going to be. And so I spent about 5 years in that project. And then when it was released, they told me the title was going to be called A Dangerous Son. And I didn't like that because my son is not dangerous. And it made me feel like I didn't have a lot of, I didn't want him to feel like he was labeled as that. However, they were the professionals, they knew how to market. And it was basically bringing up some of the very raw and real issues regarding mental illness, even that are associated with school shootings and things like that. Now, I didn't want my son to be associated with any of that. So anyway, I decided to go with their title. I was deciding if I was going to opt out or stay with, and I stayed with. And like I said, it ended up being a very profoundly successful documentary, bringing to light what is missing, what's falling through the cracks with our children with mental illness, things like that. So I found that to be a very important decision to make, to stay with it, even though I didn't agree with the decision of the title.
Okay, and our last question, is there anything you came in prepared to tell us we did not ask you? And we're going to start with David Armstrong. You're muted.
Yep, I think I've probably talked quite enough, but I would add one thing. It seems to me that particularly because of things that have happened over the past years, including council, that it's really important to set politics aside, realize we are very much all in this together, and in fact, our sense of community is really what makes Manitou sing for me. So I would hope that council would contribute to that and that I could do my part. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Brimner.
I don't have any prepared statement to make, but I just like to say that I really appreciate this forum, and I appreciate the chance to meet some of my Ward 3 people that I haven't even actually met before. And I think the questions were great. That's all.
Okay, great. Clint,
Oh, Clint is muted.
you're muted.
We
Yeah.
there?
Okay.
All right, let's start that over. I'm going to keep it a little on the light side for this one. I think I'll talk about the beard just a little bit because people ask about it. I guess it's partly my way to keep Manitou weird, but there's more than that. It's a reminder to myself not to take myself too seriously. And when you got something hanging off your chin like this, it's pretty easy to not take yourself too seriously. My granddaughter relates me to a great wizard from the Harry Potter book series, and I definitely don't want to disabuse her of that. And I've also got a great Santa gig every year with my wife's annual coat giveaway. So I need to be ready. I just keep it in tidy shape there. My second thing here in this area is COVID-19. The name is an alien name. It scares people. I don't know why we give scientists the right to name these things. I had the Hong Kong flu. I knew where it came from. It almost took me out. I was a teenager. The name COVID-19 sounds like it comes from another galaxy and aliens are going to be following right after it. So I would suggest that we use crazy bat flu. It's more human. We can wrap our brains around it and it's not quite as scary. I can imagine Manitou might someday have a crazy bat flu competition with the best antivirus mask decoration, the best hand washing technique, the best 8 p.m. howl, which I think is about to start in half an hour. And I hope the chamber is listening to some of these ideas. So, thank you.
Thank you. And our next, Edie Wilhite.
That made me laugh. Following up, I just wanted to share something. I told a friend of mine today that I was applying for this position, and she got all animated and excited about it. And she said something, and I wrote it down because I wasn't expecting her to say this, but she said, "So Edie, you bring a sense of unity everywhere you go because you have the ability to see all different viewpoints." And it just really, it struck me. And so I just wanted to elaborate on what she had said. I've only been here a year. I was told by somebody that I am a newbie. And because I'm a newbie, I'm not quite a Manitoid yet. And I took issue with that because ever since me and my husband arrived here a year ago, we bought our home here and we howl at 8 o'clock. I mean, we're here every day, you know, and we have gone to the Emma Crawford races and the discos and everything in town. We buy locally. We're true Manitoids. So I think the benefit that some people might not realize about somebody being newer is that I haven't come here with an agenda. I don't have a history of all the things that have gone on over the years. I've heard some things, but it's not personal to me. And so with my skill sets of being able to listen to what it is other people are desiring, I'm not bringing my own agenda. I'm not biased. I'm not prejudiced about what's going on. I really want to bring the best to Manitou with an impartial and an objective viewpoint. And I think that's a strength in the end of it all. So thanks so much for hearing all of us. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And our last candidate, Anna Andrews-Mills.
I also didn't come with any prepared statement exactly, but I do want to echo the thanks for the time that you've given us to answer these questions. And no matter what comes of it, I really look forward to seeing everyone around town, even if it is at 6-foot distance for a time. Or via these sort of webinar meetings. It's been a really valuable experience for me so far, and I assume it would continue to be should I become counselor or even just show up as a citizen. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And so that concludes our questions for our candidates this time. So Mayor, did you?
At this time, Council, we had allocated a little time for any follow-on questions. You know, this is something we could probably discuss all sorts of Manitou things and go on forever. So I would like to be fairly concise, but I would like to have council members have an opportunity to ask follow-on questions. So I propose is that we would do a little bit of that. We try to watch the clock and not get bogged down too much. If that sounds agreeable, and then we could, we'd still have the participation from, of course, our full panel here. So if that sounds agreeable, I would, we could entertain a few questions. I guess it would be useful to go around and kind of round robin format because it's that seems to bring a little bit of order to Zoom, which takes order out of the mix. With that said, is there a council member who'd like to ask a question? And I can only see several. Okay, the chair recognizes Councillor Wolf. Julie, you go first.
Okay, thank you. At the moment, I'm only prepared to ask Steve Bremner. So question for you, Steve. You made a comment when talking about the COG railway about how there's going to be even more traffic, more trains and so forth. And I think you said, so we need an answer to that. Can you elaborate on what that meant?
Well, I don't have the answer to it. But we do need to consider that. I mean, Ruxton is a dead-end street. It can only handle so many cars. It becomes actually a danger to residents up here if the traffic is clogged up and say we had a medical emergency or a fire emergency or something like that. If the traffic is all clogged up like it happens in the summer, even before they start having more trains. So I just don't know what's going to happen when they have twice as many trains, twice as many cars trying to come up here and park in that parking lot. I don't know.
Steve, are you aware that just about a month and a half ago, we voted to allow the COG to resume, when they're ready, with no conditions except for a once a year meeting to just schmooze? Are you aware
I wasn't aware of that, no.
Okay, my other question for you has to do with the situation with all the traffic on Ruxton that you've referred to a number of times in your interview. Would you be in favor of a system that monetizes the inclines so that there is a fee associated to climb the incline, with the money being used to pay for all of the expenses like getting more shuttles and fewer cars up and down the road and that kind of thing?
Well, yes, and I was, as I mentioned before, I was the president of the Incline Friends, so I really helped to build the incline. I look upon it now as one of my greatest regrets. I do the incline just occasionally. I'm not a big incline fan. I love the trails around here. I think the incline, I'm not sure that it benefits us as a city monetarily. I don't think that necessarily the people that come into the incline spend money in Manitou Springs. That's my personal assessment. I don't know this I don't know if studies have been done or not, but I would be in favor of monetizing the incline. I would be in favor of a reservation system for the incline. So all those things I think need to be looked at.
Thank you.
Good, thank you.
I'd like to reserve the right to ask other people questions, but unfortunately with this format, I need to go through my 5 pages of notes to find my other questions. So I'll let someone else take over.
Well, okay, let's, and we do need to be kind of concise and watch the clock here, of course.
Well, I won't talk any faster in 3 minutes than I will now. So I'll talk fast either way.
Okay, do we have another council person who'd like to ask a question? Okay, and
Okay, Councillor Wolberg has her hand up.
okay, good. Councillor Wilbur?
Thank you all. I don't have any more questions for you. I just want to thank you all for stepping up and doing this. I'm excited to see 5 people applying for this seat. I know that only one of you can be selected, but what I'd love to see is for those of you who aren't, maybe some of you are, but if you aren't currently on a board or commission or an alternate, we have some openings in town. So that would be super wonderful. Judy Morgan can fill you in after this to let you know where those seats are. Would love that very much if you are not chosen tonight. Also in the upcoming elections, the next time you would be able to run would be at the end of this term, or also you can run for at large. And we just haven't had people sign up to run in the election. And I'm here to tell you that if I can sign up and do it, I think all of you can do it. It's not really that much harder than what you did tonight. It's different, but I wouldn't say that it's harder than what you did tonight. And what you did tonight is great practice for doing that. So those are my comments tonight. Again, thank you all for stepping up. And I wish we could choose all 5 of you. That would be really amazing. But again, thank you.
Great, thank you.
And Councillor Chandler put her hand up as well.
Councillor Chandler, please.
I would just like to echo what Councillor Wolbrecht said. I thought it was amazing that there were 5 candidates that stepped up with impeccable credentials. I do have one question, and perhaps each of you can like maybe answer this in 1 minute. If you were to address one thing about parking in this town, one thing, what would be your first thing that you'd address to mitigate the parking problem?
Do we want to go ahead and go through the original lineup as far as alphabetic for response?
Seconds.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do it alphabetically.
Okay, so Anna Andrews Mills.
That's a really tough question, and I'm not sure I have a good answer. I'd really need to read up on the issues some more and see what the citizens think. I don't know that I can say I have a good action item in a minute.
Thank you.
Okay, David Armstrong.
I'm looking out my window, and Grand Avenue, the east end of it, is vacant as it is 99% of the time. And that doesn't make any sense to me. I voted against restricting parking in the way that we did. Having lived in Germany for 5.5 years in a town which is hurting for parking, you would not have a vacant street like Grand Avenue or the east half of Grand Avenue. So we improved it a little bit when parking from or residents from Park Avenue could join it. But I would like to see cars parked out in front of my house and use that parking.
Steve Brimner.
Well, as far as parking goes, I think Manitou Springs has done a pretty good job on, putting in those pay posts, that you, and on Rexon Avenue, limiting the parking, so that residents only can park on certain places in certain times. I think the parking job is done a pretty good job. So the problem is we just need to cut down on the number of cars that come up Rexon Avenue. That's my thing, and I don't know the answer to that. I think it just needs to be looked at and considered. There's too many cars on Rexon Avenue. That's the bottom line.
Okay. Clint Lewis.
Yeah, this really is an intractable problem, and I agree with Steve that we've done a pretty good job overall. The city has of kind of getting some handle on it. I'm with David on Grand Avenue. The end of it is always totally vacant. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. There have been solutions thrown out there, such as a tramway from Higginbotham Flats over to wherever, but I am really with Steve on this concept of monetizing and charging for the use of the incline, and without a permit to use it that day or whatever, you just don't go up there. So it's a waste of your time. And I think in my mind, the example of that is in Minnesota, there's the boundary waters where everybody likes to go and canoe. It's a huge area, but it's a delicate area. And so you have to apply months and months in advance to get your little 1 week slot. So it's not undoable to have some sort of monetization and a way to control how many people actually go up that incline. Some of that money could be used to actually help maintain it. So it's just an intractable problem. Get a scooter.
Okay, and Edie Wilhite.
Yeah, I literally live across the street from Hiawatha Gardens. And, the idea of building a 3-story kind of parking, garage isn't all that appealing to me on one hand, but on the other hand, I'd really like to help everybody in the town solve the problem of over traffic. I was actually over the summer going through some ideas like, well, what if people who live in town want to rent out their or their, in front of their house or their, driveway space or something, just little things. I don't know, get creative possibly with parking issues, but I think a garage and a shuttle is probably the way that it's going to end up having to be in the end. So.
That was 5 of our responses there, 5 candidates responding to that question.
Okay, great. Councilman Shada, do you have a follow-on question?
I do not, Mr. Mayor, at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem, do you have a question?
I have a million questions, but I'll only ask one.
Okay.
And that is to David Armstrong. Your resume says that you've seen a very positive development in town recently, and you'd like to do your part in supporting those developments. I wonder if you could elaborate on what those developments are.
I went to the first meeting that Denise Howell spoke, and she at the same time introduced department heads. And as I looked around, it was like 10 new faces, and I was greatly encouraged by that. And I've heard nothing but good, or the vast majority of comments have been very praiseworthy, both of Denise and the new staff members. I think this council it doesn't have the divided, unhappy quality that some of the councils have had in the past. And I think we are, well, and let me focus on, we went for years without a permanent, competent city administrator, well, or long-term. It's not permanent. It's not a permanent job. We had 2 temporary people, and it was because that is such a crucial point of the business of the city, feeding from council through to staff. That's made that's the jewel in the crown, if you will. So yeah, I think that pretty well sums it up.
Okay. And I think I will pass on asking a follow-on question. So each council member has had an opportunity to ask a question at this point. Okay. Julie, you said you might have another question. Do you?
Oh, thank you, Mayor. I have no other questions.
Okay, all right. So I think we've covered the follow-on questions. I would like, at this point, I'd like to thank all of our applicants. To repeat the comments of other council people, I think Susan was the first one to say it. We're impressed. We are gratified at your interest in wishing to serve. Susan, I think, made a good point. She said we'll only be able to pick one of the 5 of you. The rest of the other 4, please, you've got passions, you've got things that you're interested in. So please continue to, in whatever capacity, be an active citizen. So at this point, I would move that we suggest that we end the interviews and we go into the deliberation phase. What I propose is that we just do kind of a quick round robin and see where council is with our the results of our interviewing. I think it would probably be useful at first for each of us to speak a little bit as to what we think we're looking for in the Ward 3 candidate. So if I could start off, I'll ask Councilman Shada to begin, and just be brief, something like a minute, if you could address what you're looking for.
Mayor, would you like me to go ahead and move our candidates back into the attendee list off the panelist list?
Yes, please, that would be good. Then we can see the other councilmen. Thank you all, appreciate it.
So you'll still be in the meeting.
Yes.
You'll just be off the screen.
Yeah, so we'll give the city clerk a minute to do that.
Thank you. Okay.
John, you ready?
Yes, Mr. Shada, you have the floor.
You know, this is an amazing group of people, and I am really tickled and kind of struggling with my notes in terms of, so to answer your question, I like everybody that they're really open-minded. I think we have some really amazing opportunities coming before us. And so I guess I have to admit I'm kind of leaning toward people who have maybe a little more experience in the community with some of the issues and don't have to take as much time kind of coming up to speed. It's not that any of these 5 people that I couldn't work with in a minute, in an instant, really.
Okay. Thank you. See, Councillor Wolbrook, could you follow?
I don't have any comments at this time.
Okay, thank you. Would someone like to go next? Mayor Pro Tem Fortune, please.
Sure, and you know, to echo, I have to do it. 5 wonderful candidates. I could easily vote for any of them, and it was very exciting to me, like the others, that so many good candidates stepped up to the plate. I'm very encouraged by that, as well as the quality of them. What I'm looking for, one thing is kind of, I would wish we had someone who didn't live in the Agate Hill area, in the Agate Hill neighborhood. So, you know, the Ruxton area or the, you know, El Paso. That's, I think, would be nice. But probably more importantly with that, I would echo John Shada, is I think at this point, this late in the term, having someone that can hit the ground running, who clearly understands the role of a council member, is a good communicator, and has some good executive skills is something. However, as we went through the interviews, and I was thinking this from reading the resumes as well, there's a lot, since those of us on council are kind of, have a lot of very similar kind of more traditional experiences in that regard. There's a lot to be said for coming up with a someone who's very fresh and new, and is a more traditional Manitoid. And I was intrigued when one of the candidates mentioned that. So in true Libra fashion, which I am, I just, you know, I'm like this. But those are some of the things that I've been looking for. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wolf?
I have no comment. Thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you. Councillor Chandler?
I have no further questions or comments. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Well, then I guess it's my turn then. Yeah, I was impressed. I'm enthused by the fact that we had 5 people turn out. That's way more than I would have expected 2 weeks ago. So I think the interest in civic affairs is good. And when you think about it coming at such a difficult time with the coronavirus and so forth, that's doubly encouraging. That said, and thinking of the challenges that we're facing, I think the idea of having a solid skill set, people who, you know, individuals who are familiar with budgets, who are familiar with managing projects, that kind of expertise, I think that would serve us well, because I think a lot of the problems that we're facing now, you know, call for that kind of a skill set. Obviously, communications is important, organization. I think those are all strong qualities we want to look for. We want to see strengths in our Ward 3 person in that regard. I do think probably the greatest attribute in my mind is someone who can be a team player, someone who can step in fairly quickly, come up to speed. I believe that was mentioned by several other council people, but, you know, get up to speed quickly so we can make progress. Time is of the essence. If things were to go right on the COG schedule, they would be open a year from now. Don't know if that'll happen, but that'll certainly aggravate our traffic and parking problems. So we need to be, I think, very dynamic and very vigorous in addressing that problem. We have huge budget challenges. Manitou typically is always had a budget challenge problem. With the coronavirus, it's going to be that much trickier. I think we really want to preserve the spirit and the fabric of our community And those are really in my mind, the underpinnings that the public relies on for us. So thank you for your attention. That said, do we feel like we're ready to move towards a vote?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Do I have a motion to vote? Now, let me just kind of go back what we talked about last week. We can, the intent here would be to vote using the chat function on Zoom. We would each just type in the name of the candidate we would prefer. That'll go, and we would in the drop-down menu, you want to send it to Judy Morgan with host. Is that right, Judy? You're muted.
Yes, that's correct.
Judy Morgan host. So we could send that to her, and Judy will tally it up and give us the results. We do need a majority of 4 or more. Excuse me, Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, John, I believe this first round is a kind of a temperature to see if we're all going in the same direction. And then a nomination would come after that if we are. If not, we may have to do some other discussion until we get closer to do I understand that process correctly?
My understanding is that if we were to choose someone by ballot, we would still have to do a nomination.
Yes.
I will defer to the city clerk there. Judy, if you'd like to confirm that, please.
That's correct. That's correct.
So if we do select a person by ballot, then we would need to have a nomination and to approve that candidate.
A vote is a motion, a second, and a vote.
Okay. So Councilwoman Wolf?
Thank you. Just to clarify, did you just say that we have to have 4 of us vote for the same person, otherwise the vote won't carry?
It needs to be a majority.
Did I hear that right?
Yes, it needs to be a majority.
Right.
So
So if it's 3, so if 3 of us vote for one person and then the other 3 vote for random other people, that's not a majority?
No.
That question is for Judy.
No.
Okay.
So the idea is it would be, you need a majority of the council, which would be 4.
Oh, it'll be interesting. Okay.
Okay. What
happens if we have a 3-3?
So I think like Mayor Pro Tem Fortune commented, it's to kind of see if there is a predominant selection, and if so, then somebody could make a motion to appoint that person. There would need to be a second, and then there would be a vote. So the vote would be to nominate that person, a person, rather than what we're doing right now, which is basically everyone picking their number 1 choice.
Thank you.
Does that make sense to everybody?
No, but it's fine with me. I'll just see what happens. That's fine.
Okay. So then shall we go ahead and vote? Or is everyone agreed? Okay.
So John, to clarify things, we're just going to send a chat message only to Judy Morgan, right?
That's
Judy
correct.
Morgan has.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
that's correct.
She'll tally them up, right?
That's correct.
Yes.
Once I have all 6,
Okay.
I will actually read it aloud by who voted for each person.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And if you don't know, the votes are public, so that Judy will make them public.
They will be public. Yeah.
Just make sure I have everybody here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so I have 6. So I'll just go through and read that. So we'll start with the first one that came in. Councillor John Shada voted for Steve Bremner. Councillor Susan Wolbrecht voted for David Armstrong. Mayor John Graham voted for David Armstrong. Mayor Pro Tem Nancy voted for, I have David Anderson. Is that Armstrong?
Oh. Sorry about that.
Okay. Counselor Julie Wolf voted for Steve Bremner, and Judith Chandler, Steve Bremner. So it looks like we have a tie.
3-3 tie.
We have a 3-3 tie.
Okay. Well, Council, in anticipating that we might have this problem, we did prepare a couple extra questions. So if you'd like, what we could do is ask a couple more questions of the two runoff candidates. That'd be Mr. Armstrong and Mr. Bremner. We could do that and then come back and revisit this, or we could simply take a nomination if you'd like. City Clerk, I might ask you if you have a recommendation.
I think you've given the two options that are probably the best. I can bring over the two that tie with, and
Okay.
ask additional questions, or if somebody just wanted to make a nomination, motion for nomination, you can do that as well.
Okay. What I was going to say, it's almost 8 o'clock. If we would like to take a little bit of a break, we could bring the other two back, those Mr. Armstrong and Mr. Bremner. We could ask them the two questions and then revisit this. Would that be agreeable to you all? Say a 10-minute break? Okay.
Yes.
Take a break, go outside and howl if you want. And we'll see if they can, okay? We'll do it Manitou style.
Thank you.
But we went out and howled while we were doing it. Let's see, looks like we've got everybody here. Yeah.
Yes, I can 6.
So everybody's back, I think. Okay.
Would you like me to go ahead and bring over the two?
Yes, please.
I will do that. Okay, so Steve Bremner and David Armstrong, I did bring you back over to the panelist side, which is
Okay.
conducted the interviews.
Okay. Mr. Armstrong
Just stepped away.
stepped away. He'll be back.
Oh, here he comes.
Okay. So it looks like we've got everybody. So what we have is we had a 3-3 vote, tie between Mr. Armstrong and Mr. Bremner. What we would like to do at this point is we have two follow-on questions. We will give you, as before, 3 minutes each for your response, and then we'll see if we're ready to entertain another vote. So we'll see what council's up to. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and ask the questions this time. Judy has a fair amount to do in managing Zoom. I guess we'll start off alphabetically, so that we'll ask the question, and then Mr. Armstrong would respond, and then Mr. Bremner. Okay, as you've observed city council meetings, what would you consider our opportunity and challenges to be in the future? Was that, did I say, if I wasn't clear, I'll repeat it. There was a little background noise.
It was close.
Just a
Broad question. Are you looking for something specific?
Just a minute. Councilor Wolf has a problem with Zoom. Just a minute.
I think I'm back.
Okay, you're back. You were just muted. Okay. All right. Okay, so we're back to the question. Let me repeat the question. As you've observed city council meetings, what would you consider our opportunity and challenges are in the future?
Well, one challenge that I see is to consider the difficult questions calmly and quietly and respectfully. The opportunity is to find a way out of this coronavirus crisis that doesn't endanger public safety and protects to the maximum degree we can the businesses in town, the reopening of the town and supporting our economy. I mean, there are many other opportunities and challenges as well. That's just the one that is immediate right now. I mentioned before, and I think this echoes something that Steve said. Yeah, when the COG comes back online, I hope we have a good solid answer. There's no perfect answer, but a good solid answer for parking and transportation. I think, as I mentioned, having a group to really address the Ruxin corridor, which bears the brunt of so much that's going on in Manitou and difficult, is important. Both are connected to Hiawatha Gardens. Manitou doesn't, all of a sudden has less money, and yet we need to at least address how we could finance significant expenditures for parking solutions. The other great opportunity for me, and I remember something that Susan Walbrook said at one meeting, I think I've got this right, there's always that question of balancing residents' interests with business interests. And it seems to me we've gone pretty heavily on the side of business interests over time, although now we probably need to do it again. So those are some of the things that I see as opportunities and challenges.
Great, thank you. Mr. Bremner, if you'd like to respond, I can read the question again if you'd like.
I think I've got it.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's a good question. Of course, the real question is the questions that we don't know about. You know, what's going to come in the future. And of course, that requires the ability to have a good ability to make decisions and work things through as a council. Pressing right now is, of course, the coronavirus and getting past that, and the budget problems involved. My point of view regarding Ruxton and the incline, I mentioned that I'd be in favor of monetizing it or making a reservation system or something along those lines. Think outside the box, figure out ways to solve that problem of Ruxton. But the main issue, and I did send a letter or an email last week expressing my support of City Council regarding the decision on the incline. But my bottom line is the citizens of Manitou Springs are the ones that should be making the decisions about the incline and what we're going to do with the incline, not people coming from outside. I know that you get a lot of input from people that use the incline, and I know they're very vociferous and they have very strong opinions, and they want to say this or that, you know, oh, we're not going to take our business to Manitou Springs, or all these threats and so on. But the bottom line, the only ones that really matter are the taxpayers of Manitou Springs. They're the ones that need to make a decision regarding the incline.
Good.
So that's it, as far as what I see.
Good, thank you. The second question, and this time we'll start with Mr. Bremner. What would you want to accomplish during your term of office?
Well, I mentioned before that trails are a big thing with me. I'm big community minded. And I think in the past, Manitou Springs has done some great things with trails. The Intamin Trail and Mayor Mark Snyder purchasing that property on Iron Mountain, building that trail out there that goes over from the Intamin Trail over to Crystal Park Road was just great. I think there's other opportunities. I know lots of incipient trails, potential trails around Manitou Springs. They could help, it would help the citizens of Manitou Springs to have places to go walk their dogs or just be around and get viewpoints, as well as, you know, tourism. People come to Manitou Springs for a reason, and one of the reasons is for the trails and, you know, the open space. So that would be probably high on my agenda as city council.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Armstrong, and I can repeat the question if you like.
The first thing is what brought me into Manitou politics and got me engaged in the first place is fiscal sustainability, or more simply put, spending money wisely, having a capital improvement plan, having very capable, competent, accountable staff, and certainly project supervision. Park Avenue Bridge was not the only debacle in my point of view, and I recall as Denise Howell came in to the city with her experience, she said that was one thing that she was very much going to address, and which I think she has. It'd be great if we can find the money to upgrade infrastructure, so we don't be sending crews out in the middle of winter to repair water pipe breaks. And there is no perfect solution to parking and traffic congestion, but we've got to do some things. Steve just alluded to a couple of important ones, and we will do some things. Monetizing the incline, reducing the traffic volume on Ruxton sounds like a real good possibility. I know you guys have talked or investigated the hanging link situation. So we will do some things about parking and congestion, and they will probably improve things. So as a master planner and architect, I think I can make a contribution there.
Okay, very good, thank you. Well, council, now we've got, I guess we've got a couple of options. We could vote again using the system we used previously. We can do some more discussion if that's your pleasure. We can entertain a nomination. So we have all three of those options. I'm going to real quickly go around and ask each of you what your preference is here on. So three things, if you could give me direction how you feel the best course to proceed is. One would be we vote at this point. Well, let me see. Let's say the first thing is we have further discussion and maybe some more questions of the candidates or discussion amongst ourselves. The second thing would be we vote using the same approach as we used previously. Third, we could entertain a nomination for a vote. So I will go around. Councillor Chandler, do you have a preference?
She's muted.
Judith, you're muted. Judith, you're muted.
Hang on.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay. We didn't catch anything.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. I would like to see another vote before we ask further questions.
Okay, you would prefer a vote. Okay. Councillor Shada?
I can go with another vote.
Another vote. Councillor Wolf?
I can go with another vote. I just, am I allowed to make a comment as opposed to a question, or should I not?
Well, why don't you go ahead now if there's something on your mind. If you can just be quick.
What's on my mind, and I'll try to be quick, is following up from Nancy Fortune's comment that I was thinking about during the break. Dave Armstrong and I live a stone's throw away from each other. All you guys live in the same neighborhood. It's tough with the traffic, but it ain't nearly as bad as what it's like to actually live in the Ruxton corridor. Because the Ruxton corridor traffic, et cetera, issue is so huge, it's impacted by the COG, it's impacted by the incline, we've got the mobility study. We have a lot of big, important things coming down the pike that affect Steve's neighborhood, not Dave's neighborhood and my neighborhood and the mayor's neighborhood and John Shada and all of us that live in the same little neighborhood. So I think that Dave Armstrong would certainly serve well on council. I think that the Ward 3 neighborhood really deserves someone of their own, one of their own people to represent them. I know I've spoken with a number of the folks in the Ruxton corridor who have given up, and they won't come to any more meetings. They won't write any more letters. They've given up because they're so disgusted with the lack of any enforcement or control over parking congestion and degradation of their neighborhoods and devaluation of their real estate. So
Thank you.
I guess that's why I'm more inclined to go with Steve. That's one of the issues that's moving me in that direction, even though I see them both as strong candidates.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Councillor Wolbrook?
Yes, thank you. I too can go for a vote. Again, I think this is a tough choice. And I think that what Councillor Wolf has said is valid, and I could certainly get on that side of things. But I think my concern in the answers that we've gotten from both of these finalists is that I'm seeing a broader focus from Dave Armstrong, and I'm seeing maybe a broader understanding of the role that staff plays and that the budget plays. And I'm not hearing those comments as much from Mr. Brenner. So those are a deep concern for me. They'd be a deep concern anytime, but certainly in the time of COVID, they're big for me. And I get living in that ward, and I can't even imagine the problems that you have on Ruxton. I try to as a counselor, and I try to get on board with that. But at the same time, even the comment that you made about the COG, I love Mike, who's the parking guy at the COG. He's a great guy. But I doubt he's the expert on when the trains are going to run. And I don't know that that's even an appropriate comment. And that concerned me a little bit. So, I mean, I think that we have two excellent choices. And one of the reasons that I voted for Mr. Armstrong is because I felt like he brought a broader view to the argument, even though he'll be a Ward 3 rep. That's the reason that I went in that direction. But I'm up for a vote via chat.
Okay, good. Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I pretty much echo what Susan just said. I am, throughout all of David's resume and his answers that he gave tonight, demonstrated a much larger, broader base of understanding of the processes, as well as a very open mind, which I think is critical. And I've actually seen that in action. So I think that that is critical to work well on council and to represent the ward well. I did kind of cringe when Steve mentioned the parking lot guy, because it's easy to get emotional about one person's opinion on things and then realize that you got it wrong. So I don't know, he might be right. I don't know. I've been told something very different. But it did concern me. I also, most of Mr. Bremer's issues, virtually all of them regarded trails, which as the previous chair of OSAC and one of the people who helped build the Iron Mountain Trail is near and dear to my heart for sure. But that's one thing critical to this community. But I think that having a much broader base on council is something that I would like to see. So that's where I am.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And if I may win, I'll be ready for a vote here pretty quickly. Also, I would probably be echoing the comments of Councilors Wolbrook and Mayor Pro Tem Fortune regarding Mr. Armstrong. Mr. Bremer seems to be a very talented individual, and I'm very pleased that he has thrown his hat in the ring here. Again, much of his experience and his interests are with trails. I'm a person who loves trails, but I worry about a lot of other things. It seems to me like this coronavirus it's really thrown us awry. We have, prior to that, we had huge budget concerns with a long deferred infrastructure system, a real need to tackle capital improvements. As money seems to be drying up, I'm pretty deeply concerned about that. I think we really need to focus on budgets, project management, and on teamwork. And I think David's prior experience in various aspects of the community and in local government, I think that would serve us well. I think he'd be able to move into step with us pretty quickly. So with that said, I think we'd be ready to move to another vote. So if you'll all go to chat.
Oh. What do you do when chat disappears off your screen and there's nothing to click?
So you can just move your cursor around and it should show back up.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. I believe we have everybody here. Let me just double check. Okay, so looks like I got a couple of duplicates here.
Yeah, I think I sent mine twice, sorry.
That's okay. I did see that twice.
Hopefully it was for the same person both times, who knows?
Voter fraud, voter fraud.
Yeah, stuff in the ballot box.
Hey, need Chad.
Might have been an extra duplicate in there, so I just want to know so I don't read it twice. Let's see. Okay, well, let me just go ahead and I'm sure it'll be a duplicate. So if I say somebody's name twice, we'll catch it. Okay. Councillor John Shada, Steve Brimner, Mayor John Graham, David Armstrong, Nancy Fortune, David Armstrong, Julie Wolf, Steve Brimner, Susan Wolbrook, David Armstrong, and Chandler, Steve Brimner. So it looks like we have the same vote.
3-3 tie. Well,
there could be somebody who wants to just go ahead and make a motion, and then it's possible that you might get a different outcome.
How likely do you think that is, Judy?
I've seen it happen.
Okay.
I'll make a motion.
We can't
I'll make a motion that we move that we appoint Steve Bremner as Ward 3 representative on City Council.
We have a motion.
I'll second that.
We have a second by John Shadis. Motion is second. Okay, so the motion on the floor is to appoint Steve Bremner as the Ward 3 council person. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Raise your hand. So we have councilors Wolf, Chandler, and Shada. All opposed, say nay and raise your hand.
Nay.
Same results. Okay. It appears that we're deadlocked. It seems to me like about all we can do is continue this to another meeting.
I think we should bring our city attorney back and ask him if there's any legal guidance in this situation.
That wouldn't hurt. Denise, can you text Mr. Parker and bring him, explain the situation and bring him back? And if the city clerk could make his image available on our screens when he gets back.
And I will get Denise back on the screen as well.
Hi.
Hello, Mr. Parker.
I've been watching.
You've been watching. You know, so you're up to speed. You've seen that we voted twice with the same results.
Yeah.
Deadlock, 3-3 tie. We're looking for advice. It seems to me one alternative would be to continue this to another meeting. Perhaps you could give us some insights.
Yeah, I don't have a great perfect solution because, as your city clerks pointed out, you need to have a majority vote to make an appointment. And, you know, you can go back and forth all night with the same vote. You could have more debate on it, more discussion if you want, that's fine. You know, but ultimately, if you're tied, like any other vote, it's a tie, and ties fail.
Right.
So, you know, it may be worth postponing it, continue to another meeting for some further thought. You know, one other option, which isn't required, but it's an option, and you know, it costs money, is to submit it to the electors of Ward 3 for an actual election. But that's you know, it's an endeavor to do that, but it certainly is an option.
Okay.
So I don't have a perfect solution. I'm sorry I couldn't provide the magic solution tonight.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I would move that we continue this to, I'm sorry, Councilor Wolbrook, I think you raised your hand.
Well, I mean, I personally like the option of taking it to the voters of Ward 3, but I know that costs money, and I don't know how much money that costs. So I know that when we've talked about special elections before, it seems like they're in the 15 grand category. Do we have some ideas on that, or can we bring that back to the next meeting as an option?
And what about the issue? We had 60 days to appoint somebody per our charter, I think.
That's actually not in your charter. Yeah, section 4.6 of your charter addresses when you go below 4 elected officials.
Oh, okay.
Not when you just can't appoint one. So.
Can I make a suggestion? I mean, I think the cost is when we kind of involve the county. I guess what I'm curious about, Judy, is if we just did a old-fashioned kind of paper ballot system or something like that. You know, if we could come up with some kind of way as an option to kind of just do a mailing from City Hall and not involving the county. You know what I mean? Getting the voter rolls from them and the whole 9 yards. Is that a possibility in your mind?
So there's a way to do it where the clerk's office takes care of the election, but you still have to follow all the rules that the state has in elections, and you have to hire, you know, various people to do various parts that are required in an election. It still costs money. It seems to me the number I recall is like maybe close to 3,000 to 5,000, somewhere in that range. For doing a ward election. And but that's, you know, we don't have to have the county do all the parts to it, but we still have to go through all the steps and processes.
Right. So you're thinking that even having the county doing it is only like maybe 3,000 to 4,000?
I'd have to find out if the county would do it, if it's just
Okay.
a ward election.
Okay.
And so, yes, I would have to do some research on it and come back with some more definitive answers for you. But that's my understanding. I know when we were looking at doing a ward election for another situation, that's my recollection of around the cost for it.
Thank you.
Councilor Wolf?
Thank you. At first, I didn't like the idea of just postponing it indefinitely, but I've been persuaded that it would help me to have more information on the cost as well as the timing involved with the possible citizen vote, and then just having just time to chat with my Ward 3 constituents here in the neighborhood. I'd be in favor of postponing this.
Other comments? Okay, it looks like we're not gonna have much choice but to postpone it. You know, I look at things and you've probably been contacted by constituents who've lost their jobs, who don't know if they're going to, if they're going to have their businesses and so forth. And we can't make some decisions here. I'm really kind of disappointed in our inability to go forward. I understand democracy, I understand a tie vote, and I guess we're going to have to go towards a postponement and get this done eventually. But we have great concerns throughout the community. I think the people expect us to get something done. I am not happy that we're not moving forward. This is very frustrating. Councilor
You can always change your vote.
I'm not disappointed, and I'll tell you why. I mean, I can't tell you how many people came up to me and told me that I was running unopposed for my seat, and I actually felt some shame about it. And here we have 5 stellar candidates stepping up to the plate to choose from for Ward 3. And just because we're tied 3-3 down to 2 candidates, we went from 5 candidates down to two stellar candidates. I will say that, I live in Manitou. It's a spa town. It is a hiker town. It is an incline town. And one of the things I really liked about Mr. Bremer was his focus on the outdoors. And I really appreciate that he has come full circle on some decisions that he's made in the past. So I think it's phenomenal that our council has narrowed it down to 3 stellar candidates. And just because we can't all agree on one candidate, I think this is democracy in action. And I'm glad to see that there is still democracy in action somewhere in the world.
Thank you, Judith.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I would just, I'm not opposed to delaying it because I think we all need to get our heads around this a bit more. I guess I target this at myself and all 6 of us, that we need to think very hard about what it is and what it would take for any of us to change our vote. Is there a question that we could ask? Is there information we could find out, et cetera, et cetera? So I guess that will be my homework until we get this, if we choose to put it back on the agenda at a later date.
Would someone like to make a motion to postpone this?
I move we postpone this matter to our next regular meeting.
Second. Motion is second. Any discussion? All in favor of moving this to the next regular meeting, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. The matter will be continued on May the 19th. To the candidates, thank you for your time and participation. I guess we'll probably see you in a couple of weeks. So please keep the night of May the 19th open.
And thank you so much for stepping up to the plate. 2 outstanding candidates.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Well, there's no point in, the oath of office was the next item. We won't be doing that. Next item then is a hearing, public hearing and consideration of an application for a new hotel and restaurant liquor license at 9 Capitol Hill Avenue, the Manitou Springs Historical Society, doing business as Miramont Castle. Okay.
Mayor, if I could just have you hold for a moment. I'm trying to get our 2 applicants back over to the attendee side and get our applicant for the liquor license over here. So.
Oh, may I ask a question, Mayor?
No, we're moving on to the next item.
Well, I just didn't know if you really wanted to be paying the attorney to sit through this next thing. I don't know that we need him or want him. Do we want him? I mean, I love him, but do we want to pay him to sit through the rest of this meeting? That was my question. If you refuse to answer, that's your choice.
No, that's fine. Okay. Councilor Walbrook has her hand up. You're muted.
Okay, I would like Jeff to stay because this is it's a hearing, and we might have questions that I would hate to dismiss him. And in the past, I think he stayed for those. And if we don't have questions, then we don't. But if we did, I'd sure like him to be here.
Okay.
Okay.
I would be happy to hop off after the hearing or after this item, because there's just a presentation and other correspondence. Whatever you want, I'm happy to do whatever you want.
Okay, all right, thank you. I guess if you, Mr. Parker, if you'd remain in attendance for the liquor hearing.
Sure.
Sorry. Just get, I don't know what this thing is doing. Brought over the wrong person here. Okay, all right. It's better. Okay. So would you like me to go ahead and, well.
Hi.
Hello. Okay, Mayor, so just an overview on the public hearing. We do have the City Council acting as the local licensing authority, and this are to open a public hearing for the staff presentation, and the applicant presentation, then public comment, then applicant response, then close the public hearing, then the deliberation and decision. So just sort of an overview, Mayor. So if you would like to go ahead and open the public hearing. So
All right, I declare this public hearing to be open. And for the city clerk would start off by giving me her administrative report.
yes, thank you. So the Manitou Springs Historical Society, doing business as the Miramont Castle, has applied for approval of a hotel and restaurant liquor license at 9 Capitol Hill Avenue, Manitou Springs. They're asking for a hotel and restaurant license. And so just sort of an opening, the obligation and authority of the Liquor License Authority is obligated to conduct a needs and desires hearing. The neighborhood has been designated by the city to be all the properties within 100 feet of the proposed location. The applicant has a burden to provide evidence in the affirmative that the needs and desires of the neighborhood are not met without the issuance of the proposed license. So, and in order to approve for a hotel and restaurant liquor license, the Colorado Liquor License Code requires an applicant to participate in a public hearing. Okay, the applicant was identified as Manitou Springs Historical Society, and the board members of the nonprofit are identified as Joseph Alessi, President, Derek John Cook, Vice President, Linda A. Pineda, Secretary, and Peggy Annette Yeager as Treasurer. The location summary, the castle is allowed as an existing non-conforming use in the general residential zone district. The location has not been denied a liquor license for needs desires within the past 2 years. It is not within the distance limitation of a school, and the Manitou Springs Police have not identified this general location as too dense with liquor licenses, that it would create a law enforcement issue if this one was granted. The background information was submitted. All board members or officers of a nonprofit are required to submit a background check. Individual history, record form, and fingerprints were submitted by the 4 Manitou Springs Historical Society board members. Those are just Joseph Alessi, Derek Cook, Linda Pineda, and Peggy Yeager. And so those background checks were conducted. Evidence of support. The evidence of support is required in order for the Liquor Licensing Authority to consider the reasonable requirements of the neighborhood as well as the desires of the adult inhabitants. The applicant has the burden of producing evidence that the adult residents and business owners within the designated neighborhood are in support of the application. And in Manitou Springs, the designated neighborhood has been identified as all properties within 100 feet of the proposed location's property boundaries. A petition was submitted. Those results are included in the report. And I'll read the petition summary. Nothing but positive feedback from everyone we talked to. Most of the residents were surprised that we didn't already have a liquor license. The one resident that didn't sign only refused due to parking in general. Some of it we can address, some we cannot. We address a complaint from residents about incliners using our parking lot. For Mayor Geray's request, we chained off our parking lot in the evenings until someone ripped out one of our posts. We will repair it as soon as it warms up. We also allow Our Lady of Perpetual Help to use our lots on Sunday. I have attached that letter. That is attached. The notice of public hearing has been noticed by way of the required poster at the premises on April 2nd, as well as a legal notice in the newspaper published April 2nd. These notices meet and exceed the 10-day standard in the Liquor Code. Background checks on the 4 Manitou Springs Historical Society board members were conducted by the Colorado Bureau of Investigation and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And the findings were the applicants have no criminal history. And so in reference to this hearing, it is quasi-judicial. And the purpose is to receive information, data, and testimony by interested parties in order to enable the authority to make findings and reach the conclusions required to be made by state law as to whether or not the application should be approved or denied. Those persons who will be heard during the hearing are parties in interest. The Colorado Liquor Code defines parties in interest as being the applicant, adult residents of the neighborhood, and owners, managers of businesses located in the defined neighborhoods. The hearing sequence, I did refer to that in the opening. I have offered evidence through this administrative report and testify that the posting and legal notice occurred as required. And just a note, with those postings that were done, I did not receive any comments or anything at all from any public. The applicant will present any evidence desired in support of granting of the application, including the reasonable requirements of the neighborhood that establish a need for the issuance of a license and the desire of the inhabitants of the neighborhood. And the applicant has the burden of persuading the authority with sufficient evidence to indicate that all state and local criteria has or will be met. And following the conclusion of the applicant's presentation, parties and interests are given an opportunity to provide comment in the form of testimony, letters, or petitions in support of or in opposition to the license application. In order to confirm status, they must identify themselves by stating their name and address or other qualifying factors for the record. The applicant may provide any rebuttal or closing comments as desired. And in conclusion, the authority should make a decision based on the evidence presented at the hearing. So the letter that was provided to the applicant shows the following has been determined. Just to reiterate, the location of the premises is within the city limits and falls under the jurisdiction of the Manitou Springs City Council, sitting as the local licensing authority. In the last 2 years preceding the date of application acceptance, there has not been a denial of a hotel or restaurant liquor license at this location, for the reason that the reasonable requirements of the neighborhood were satisfied by the existing outlets. It appears from the application documents that they are entitled to possession of the premises, where they propose to exercise the license applied for, and the possession will continue throughout the initial term of the license if granted. The sale of liquor on the proposed premises is not a violation of the City of Manitou Springs ordinance or regulations. The proposed location is not within 495 feet of a school, and the Manitou Springs City Council has designated the neighborhood as all properties within 100 feet of the proposed location. So that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Then I guess we're ready to hear from the applicant then. Can we project the applicant?
Okay, the applicant is on the screen, and we have Peggy Yeager. Well, Peggy, would you like to introduce who you have there with you?
This is Eli King. She's my assistant. She's my right hand, and Leah Blake.
Okay.
She is actually works in the tea room.
Okay. Yeah. And so, Peggy, this is your opportunity to speak to the liquor license or the licensing authority, which is our council, and give your reason for need of this liquor license.
Nice.
Well, I don't know how many of you all have been to Miramont. We purchased the building in 1976. It was a condemned property, and we have been working all of these years to restore it back to the building that it once was. We get no funding other than what we are able to bring through the door. And so we have to be very, very creative. We have a 14,000 square foot building, and you know, we have to perform all of the maintenance and upkeep, all the utilities, and we have a fairly large staff. We did have until COVID hit. We had 14 employees, and we have poured a lot of money into our tea room. We have wanted to step it up and make it one of the more premier tea rooms in the area. We did a big remodel on it last year, bringing in, the tea room was enclosed in 93, I believe. It had been a veranda. And so when we redid it, we brought in period lighting and more period architect to the room itself. And so as we've gotten better, we are starting to be compared to different tea rooms. And right now, our comparison is to the Brown Palace in Denver. And through a lot of the events that we have here, like Mother's Day, people ask if they could have a mimosa, if they could have a glass of wine, if they could have some champagne. And of course, we haven't been able to accommodate them for that. If we were able to do that, you know, it would of course step up our price in teas, generating more income for us. We do many special events. The latest ones that we've been doing is an evening with Poe. We've had 2 of those. They've been very successful. We do weddings and dinners, and a lot of people would like to be able to serve liquor, but with us not having a liquor license, we've not been able to do that. On some occasions, we have requested a special use permit, which has allowed us to do that. But if it's something that we could do all of the time, it would be it would be very beneficial to us in our running of the business. And now with, you know, us being shut down the way everybody was shut down, not just us, we are going to be having to do more and more events and stuff to maintain ourselves. It has hit us really hard. That's pretty much, you know, what we're trying to accomplish. The residents around us, you know, we try to be a good neighbor and help them any way we can and control the parking at these special events, keeping it mostly on our property so as not to impact other, you know, our other residents. I think that's pretty much sums up what we're trying to accomplish.
Okay, great, thank you. And you'll have a chance to comment again after we hear from parties in interest. So at this time, I'd like to go ahead and see if we have comments from parties in interest, essentially public comment.
And at this
City
time,
Clerk, do we have anyone?
I do not see any hands raised from our attendees. If anybody did wish to make a comment, they would need to do the hand raise tool. I don't have anything coming through my emails. So at this time, I would say without any further activity, it does not appear we have any comments from the public.
Okay. And not having any comments, I guess we don't need to have any rebuttal. Although you, Mrs. Yeager, do have the opportunity to make closing comments if you would like.
Well, the only thing I could say to council is, you know, we have a very small staff up here. We work very, very hard. This is something that would be very beneficial to us, you know, to be able to have more evening parties and dinners and little small weddings, and to be able to present the opportunity for people to have liquor. A lot of people will not book with us because they do not want to pay that $100 for the, you know, the special use permit. I think that's pretty much where we're at.
Okay, thank you. At this time, then, I will close the public hearing and we can move into the deliberation phase. Council, do you have, we could entertain a motion? Some discussion?
I move approval of this liquor license.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second.
Councilor Chan, so we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? Okay, there being no discussion, let's go ahead and vote. All in favor of granting the liquor license, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we have 6 hands.
I couldn't see Councilor Wolbrook.
There were 6 hands raised.
Okay, great. Okay, so good. Motion passes unanimously. Great.
Thank you all so much. We can't tell you how much we appreciate it. We appreciate your support.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Okay, great. Yes, have a good evening. Okay, next item of business is presentation, new art, Johnny Stegosaurus. And City Clerk.
So I believe we do have somebody here to speak on that. Dwayne Bredwick. And I've just brought him over to the panelist side.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right. Awesome. So I'm Dwayne Bredwick. I'm on the Manitou Springs Arts Council. I'm the president right now. We have been putting art on the avenue in Manitou for about 15 years. And the latest addition is Johnny Stegosaurus. He's coming in from the Colorado Springs Art on the Streets program. 3 years ago, we made an agreement with Claire Swinford, who directs the Art on the Streets program in Colorado Springs. And they have a pre-curated system. They have professional curators that come in. Their art is drawn in by a international call. So we're pretty lucky to basically get some of their art into Manitou without much cost to the community of Manitou Springs. So last year we had 3 new pieces for Manitou, from Colorado Springs. This year we just have the one, and it's Johnny Stegosaurus. Did everybody get to see a image of it?
I'm attempting to bring that up right now, so.
Okay. The artist is Paul Brandt. He works with metal. He's a farmer, a metal sculptor. He works with recycled machine parts. Johnny Stegosaurus right now, if you want to go see him before he comes to Manitou, is outside of the Wild Goose Cafe, I think it's called, on Tejon. The proposed location in Manitou is going to be one of the pads in 7 Minute Spring Park. There we go. Yeah, that's my rough and ready cut and paste. I got up my scissors and cut that in. Nothing digital about that. It weighs about 500 pounds. It's about 4 feet tall, 21 inches wide, 8 feet long. And as as per our past working with the city, we work with Public Works. They generally provide whatever we need. In this case, it's going to do a forklift, a hammer drill, because it's a concrete pad. Some of the other locations require, welding. So Public Works has been great working with us over the years. It's scheduled to be installed this Friday at 11 o'clock. If you're around, please stop by. Are there any questions about the art or the process of presentation?
Any questions?
Yes, there's one.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Just quickly, I didn't hear if you said it was is it replacing an existing piece of art in Seven Spring, like the rose or anything, or is it new? A new location?
There are about 4 empty
Okay.
ground level pads right now. So we're trying to fill the pads with art.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Did I see other hands out there? Councilor Wolf.
Oh, thank you. I just wasn't clear. Are we purchasing this? Are we renting this? Is it being donated? I missed out on the arrangement.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great question. I didn't go into that. So the Arts Council offers a stipend of between $500 to $1,000 to an artist for their work to be in Manitou for a year. Many artists allow us to keep their work for more than a year. So like in the case of Rose Dancer, for example, we got that last year, and the artist is letting us keep it for another year. So it's a great deal for us because we're not paying them another stipend. But after a year, if the artist wants their art back, they get to take it. Johnny Stegosaurus, we're giving the artist an $800 stipend for him to stay here for a year. The artist had higher offers from other communities, but because many of the artists love Manitou, they love the idea of their art coming here. So they actually go for a slightly lower stipend that we offer that other communities further away beat. So that's cool.
I just think it's adorable.
Yeah, it's really cute.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for hanging in there till the 9 o'clock hour.
Sure.
We appreciate your service and your help.
I just want to say one more thing. So
yeah.
this process is a presentation, and it's called deemed acceptance. So I'll just read a couple of sentences, and it's like each piece of artwork selected by the Manitou Springs Arts Council and its location as deemed by the Manitou Springs Arts Council shall be deemed to be acceptable to the City Council unless the majority of City Council votes to reject the artwork. So a lot of people ask, what is this? Are we approving something? And basically, this is just a presentation. And if there was any controversy about the art, then the City Council would hear about the controversy. There has been none. We have had no negative comments. Frankly, no comments at all. But this would have been the opportunity if there was a community outroar to say, no, we don't want this dinosaur here. This would have been the opportunity for the majority of City Council to vote it down.
Okay. Well, I don't see any sentiment towards that direction. It seems like we're all pretty enthused about it. So.
Awesome.
Okay, great. Any further comment from council? Okay, great. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Next item of business to receive or act on council correspondence. Would anyone like to go first? Councilor Wolf.
Jeff, do you want to stay?
I'm here at your pleasure. It's up to the city council.
I would request
that we let Jeff go home.
I would prefer Mr. Parker stay.
Oh, then I guess, do I have a second? No? Okay, you can stay.
Hate to have another 3-3 vote on that.
Yeah, well, you can hear all about the correspondence we've been getting.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
Councilor Wolf, did you have anything else?
The only correspondence I received, I forwarded to City Council. It was all regarding incline and or Ruxton traffic issues. I've
Okay.
already forwarded it, so I have nothing further.
Okay. Councillor Chandler?
I don't have anything new tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Wilbrook, you have something?
Yeah, yes, we all got an email from Bruno Potier. He lives in my ward and he's a former public services director, I believe. But there's a note there about some possibilities for COVID testing using the sewage and system and where we would do that. And I just wanted to acknowledge that. I don't know if that works for us or not, but that's great. And then I do want to ask a question about correspondence that I've gotten about the incline. And I know that Roy's trying to accumulate all of those, but it's interesting to me because truthfully, Colorado Springs Parks Department should see these notes as well. These are notes across the board. Some of them support the incline closure, some don't. And I'm wondering if it's appropriate for me to, when I respond to them, to ask if they, and give them the names and of who would we forward that to. It's kind of a loaded question, but it's all related to council correspondence because we have an intergovernmental agreement with Colorado Springs about the incline. And the incline is, of course, Colorado Springs Park. And it just happens to be right next to our town. And so we get these wonderful letters, either for or against. They're all really great letters. And everybody, I think many people do a great job of expressing themselves sometimes in one sentence and sometimes in many sentences. But I'd like to know what staff thinks and the mayor and the rest of council about Colorado Springs getting this, because I feel like they're not getting them. I don't see any of the people who write these letters to us copying City of Colorado Springs on them.
Good point. We've been collecting those letters.
If we don't have an answer tonight, it's okay. Yeah. I'm okay to not have an answer, but I don't know what to do, and I don't want to do something inappropriate.
Okay. I see Mayor Pro Tem has her hand up, and then Mr. Shada.
Yeah, and interestingly, I was going to raise the general issue of council correspondence tonight across the board, because so many of us get correspondence will come to one of us, 2, 3, all of us, whatever. One person will answer it without us knowing, someone else will answer it, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then some people probably just fall through the cracks and never get an answer. So I'd asked Denise about, she was going to get best practices, try to get best practices from CML on that so that we could come up with maybe some best practices as a council on how to deal with council correspondence. Specifically your question, Susan, I would, without hearing from anybody else, I would certainly be amenable with Colorado Springs, and I think it would be healthy for them to have access to all of that incline correspondence as well. And I'll get off of that topic now because I don't know that it has to be decided tonight. And my other thing of council correspondence was I was at Parab last night, and one of the things they recommended was that their Conservation Trust Fund, some funds from their Conservation Trust Fund be put against the city gardener contract to continue gardening in the parks. That wouldn't include all the beds in the city, but at least because Conservation Trust Fund really doesn't support that, but it would go toward maintaining gardens in the park. So that was a very interesting and I think smart decision on their part. Thank you.
All right. Councilman Shada.
Nancy had everything to say what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay. Julie, I see you got your hand up again. Julie?
Oh, I was just going to clarify a comment that Susan made, because I think a lot of the residents I talked to are confused by this. Even though Colorado Springs owns part of the incline land, it's in Manitou. It's not next to Manitou. It's in Manitou. And that's why we have the right to fine people for going on the Colorado Springs land, because it's in Manitou. And just so if there are any people in the public listening, we do have the right to stop people and even fine people or even jail people for trespassing on the incline because it's within our city limits. I just wanted to clarify that. I don't disagree with anything that was said otherwise.
Okay, great. All right, I think all the council members other than myself have spoken on council correspondence, so I'll take this opportunity. I have a couple things. First, Denise made a recommendation. If when we're going through our packets and reviewing materials, if we have questions that we need clarification on, we can mail her so that she can respond or provide some light on the matter in anticipation of the council meeting. That might be useful to some of us. It would help improve the flow of meetings. The other piece of information I have has to do with the relationship between city council, which is essentially a policy-making body, and city staff, which is operationally oriented. And these are two separate roles, and we need to be careful about our roles. First, no single member of city council can direct any city employee regarding how to perform their job. The city council is the direct supervisor of the police chief. So the city council as a body can provide a degree of direction to the police chief, but only a degree. There is a line permissible between setting priorities and general direction for law enforcement and impermissible direction on actually policing techniques. Generally, the city council can set enforcement priorities, particularly with respect to violations of the city's municipal code and related emergency orders. If the city council wants to make enforcement of incline violations a top law enforcement priority, city council may do so. Then it will be up to Chief Churchill and his department to determine how to execute on that direction. If the city council does not desire the police department to follow the same recommended approach as is set forth in the guidance documents provided, they may provide different direction. The city council could provide direction that the police department take a more strict approach and use criminal citations as a primary means of enforcement versus education and warnings. They could even provide direction that there should be zero tolerance. It would be then up to Chief Churchill and his department to determine how to carry out the direction. Recommendations on this, it is much more effective for city council to clearly communicate its law enforcement priorities and then let the police chief and his department determine the most effective method to achieve compliance. Any direction provided by city council should come after receipt of information from the police chief so council can make an informed decision regarding priorities. Discussion of law enforcement and council intent can be an agenda priority. We should advocate voluntary compliance as alternatives are not necessarily feasible. Okay, this came about because on Saturday, a city council person, there was a call from city council person's phone directing the police to go up and issue citations and come up with stronger enforcement. No single member of council can do this. Council as a body can influence the direction of the police, just as I've read. Okay, so we are coming into a situation here where we may have more concerns about enforcement. We certainly have concerns not only with council directing police, but potentially directing other departments in the city, other members of staff. There's a clear line as well. There's a line, and it's generally, in often cases, clear as to what council can do and as we need to do things as a body. So we need to be alert that we're not giving direction to city employees. Okay. Are there any questions? Councilor Wolf.
Thank you. I don't know if you're referring to me or not, but I just want to make a true confession that over the weekend I did call whatever that phone number is, not Manitou Police, not Colorado Springs Police, but that phone number that supposedly we're supposed to call, and spoke with dispatch, and I did complain about the lack of police presence at the incline and all of the people I saw up there who were, just hiking in spite of the do not enter sign, and asked if there's any police presence planning to be up there or not. And I was told that I could get a return call if I want. And I said, yes, that would be nice. And I got a call from an officer who explained that at least that particular day, they were only working so many, like 4 or 5 hours in the morning, and then they were gonna leave the incline patrolled or not patrolled from like around 11 until 2 or 3, and then they were going to go back at 3. And I said, okay, well, thank you for telling me. I just didn't know if we were planning on having any police officers there, because I sure didn't see any voluntary ambassadors. And they said, no, but that's our schedule. And, thank you for your concern. And I said, okay, well, thank you for your answer. So, if that was directing staff, then I didn't mean to direct staff, but I did call and find out as a citizen what's going on.
Okay, well, we all need to understand that we, as a body, we can have some direction. We have to be very careful, and as individuals, we cannot influence or direct city staff. Councilor Chandler?
I would just like to go on record and say that as city council members, we wear a number of hats. And unlike many of our staff people who are phenomenal, at the end of the day, we live here. So we are city council members. We are also residents. We are property owners. We are taxpayers, and we are stakeholders. And I've had a number of incidences in the last several months where I've had to take my city council hat off and deal with issues in our town as a stakeholder, resident, taxpayer, homeowner. And I am not going to give up my right to act as a citizen in this town against things that I do not feel are appropriate. Now, one thing I will say is that when I'm acting in the capacity of a city council member, I will put my city council hat on, and when I'm acting in the capacity of a resident, taxpayer, homeowner, that I have every right to speak up to an issue that impacts me. I did not call enforcement, but I go up to the incline every day, and I went up to the incline on Saturday, and there were at least 5 people at the trailhead and a number of people on the incline. And I find it sad and frustrating that we as a city council vote to close the incline, and we cannot count on the city to enforce it for us. We can vote on it, but if the city doesn't back us up, you know what? Who cares? And that's really frustrating, Mayor John, because we voted as a council to close the incline, and what kind of support do we have from the city to enforce it? Because if we don't have enforcement, then we can decide things all day as a city council, and it doesn't have any teeth and it doesn't have any meaning. So we voted as a council to close the incline, and I'd like to know what is the problem with enforcing it?
Well, I think probably the police chief could speak to it in better detail. One of the problems I think is, yes, I think the penalty is we can throw somebody in the jail for 90 days by the letter of the law.
But we're not doing that.
No, we're not doing that. And in most minor crimes, people aren't going to jail because it's the age of the COVID virus. What are you going to do with somebody you arrest? Police officers have a real limitation. We have gotten pretty good results with voluntary compliance. I think we've had something like a 91% reduction in the number of people using the incline. We've gotten that without spending a whole lot of money or getting into confrontational situations. I know of one instance where a Manitou Springs police officer got into very much confrontation. It sounds like it could have turned into a fist fight. What are we going to do? We've got 2 police officers on duty generally. Sure, we could fortify that if we wanted to throw the whole city budget at paying lots of overtime for the police. This is it's a problem. I don't have a single solid answer. I understand your frustration. It's real vexing to see people hop over the barricade or throw it aside. Question, do we want to spend a whole lot of money? Do we want to put our police officers at risk for something that may not get us very much? Councilor Wolf.
I'm sorry, Nancy Fortune had her hand up, and I'll defer to Nancy since I've spoken already.
Right,
no, first of all, I think the city staff has done quite a lot trying to close down the incline. Something that for years, it's impossible. We've never been, even when it was illegal, didn't even come close to shutting down the incline back, 8-9 years ago. But the city, since we requested this in the emergency ordinance, signs have gone up repeatedly. We spent a lot of money on signs, and yes, they've been torn down. We've done a lot of communication. We've worked closely with Colorado Springs. I think getting Mayor Suthers to, come out semi in favor of it was a big accomplishment. So I think it's a little unfair to say that that the city has not done anything trying to close it down. But I look, in accordance with state requirements, we closed down the skate park as well, and we have lots of problems there as well. I mean, I was horrified by the one email we got who said, the users have taken back the state skate park. That to me was a very threatening email, and I personally don't want to put our police officers in the position of choosing or politicizing, first of all, our police force, and secondly, putting them in the position of not having the choice between where they think the risks are within the city. So given that we're, close to a 90% decrease in numbers, I think that is a big accomplishment. I think that having the ambassadors up there has been very useful. So anyway, so we can't do the impossible. So we get to 90% of the impossible, and I think that's pretty darn good at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Wolf?
I just wanted to mirror what Judith said, just going forward, unless you can educate me otherwise. But I intend to continue to behave like a resident, even though I'm on council. So I call the police when I need to. I'm going to keep doing that. I tell them my name, I tell them my address, I tell them my concern, I tell them who's, illegally parking on my street, or who's screaming, walking down the street like they're about to kill somebody, having a schizophrenic episode. And I tell them if I'm cruising around town and there are no ambassadors or cops to be seen and there's 20 people, going in the incline. So unless you can tell me that that's illegal, or, I'm directing staff, I'm going to continue to act like a resident as well as a city council person, always making it clear on the phone, like Judith said, which hat I'm wearing. But I'm not going to stop calling the police just because you might yell at me for directing staff. Unless there's a distinction, I should appreciate that. I don't see that's directing staff. And if you think it is directing staff, then I need you to help explain that to me better. Because I don't think that's directing staff. I think that's just being a normal citizen, and I don't want to give up my rights as a citizen just because I joined council.
Right. All citizens have the right to call the police and do the things that you basically were talking about there. Members of council are held to a higher standard. We have to be careful about anything that looks like us directing staff. That has can be illegal. It can be certainly an impropriety, and it can have a real negative effect on staff. Okay, it can cause tension, it can cause dissent, and apprehension. So we need to be team players. Councilor Chandler?
So part of being held to a higher standard for me is being the eyes and ears and sounding board for this town. And I want to tell you that took a motorcycle ride up to the incline. I try to go to the incline every day, or go into town and just look at who's wearing masks and who's social distancing and what's going on, just so I have a flavor for it, or I get out and walk my dog. So I'm just going to tell you, just on Saturday, the sign that the incline was closed, that it has been at the city hall, is gone. The only sign that was posted that the incline was closed was the sign at the roundabout. When I got to the trailhead, the bathroom, obviously the bathrooms are open, so people can still use those. City hasn't closed those down. The sign, the barrier to the incline was knocked down. there were at least 5 people on the at the trailhead and several people coming down the incline, and at least a dozen people walking up Ruxton to go to the incline or one other trailhead. So I feel like as the eyes and ears of this town, I feel like we are held to a higher standard. We're looking out for things going on with this town so we can tell staff and the police, hey, this is going on and we voted for this. And I feel like when I do sometimes voice my concerns, I, instead of being applauded for my extra work, I get shot down for it. And I think that, you know, it's kind of a double standard. And like Julie said, I'm gonna continue to be a resident in this town, but also I'm gonna be the eyes and ears. And if I see something that isn't right, I'm gonna report it.
Okay, thank you. And I saw the city clerk. I'm sorry, and the city clerk, Judy, you had a comment.
So I'm a little concerned at the extent of this conversation. I'm just wondering if you want to put this on a future agenda so that you can have this conversation and those people who might want to come and listen to it will know it's being discussed.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah, we spent a little more time on it first than something since we haven't had it on agenda. Okay. Well, that said, the next item is to consider future agendas. So I'll just go around the table here and see if anyone has ideas. Councilor Wolbrook, anything you'd like to see on a future agenda?
Again, no, not really. And one of the concerns that I have is that while we're doing these Zoom conferences, which I think are going quite well, all things considered, I worry about people's inability to participate. So I want to be careful that we're, you know, doing the business that we have to do during COVID, and that's just something that everybody considers.
Okay, good, thank you. Okay, Councilman Shada?
Actually, you know, I was looking at how many people were participating tonight, and I think we had 45 people. I think that would be almost a full council chambers. So I was actually pretty amazed that people have figured out this kind of technology. And so, but no, I don't have any other comments, John. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councilor Chandler?
Nothing tonight to add.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem?
Sorry, nothing to add, thank you, other than the best practices on council correspondence.
Okay.
And that may not be an agenda item, it may be an info paper.
Okay, sure. Councilor Wolf?
Thank you. I got a call from Nancy Fortune the other day suggesting that if we hear from all the department heads as to their goals and priorities, ongoing projects at next meeting for 2 hours, then if we don't have enough time in that 2-hour slot for council to ask, either debate or deliberate together, or to ask some follow-up questions of the department heads after their presentation, then I was told that the following work session 2 weeks later, there would be time reserved on our meeting schedule to finish up anything that has to do with directing staff as to the policy direction we want them to go in for the next 3 months, before we then have the big, you know, goals and objectives meeting at the end of the summer when we go through the entire budget. And that was Susan's recommendation when I first asked for this big meeting on goals and objectives. And Nancy persuaded me that, yes, Susan made a lot of sense, that why have this meeting twice. So the big meeting would be held at the end of the summer when we do the budget review, but that we would still have an opportunity to direct or redirect staff as to what policy investigations we'd like them to do and to bring back to us. So as long as that discussion I had with Nancy is in fact put on the agenda, I'd be happy. That was, that proposal was fine with me.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
And I don't have anything, so good. Okay, so next item is the city administrator's report. Mr. Cheney?
I only have one thing tonight. Pike Wright has contacted the city with a possible grant from CDOT that could bring rentable bikes to the city. So planning is working with Pike Wright, Natalie Johnson, to see if we can partner with them in 2020. That's
Okay,
all I have
great.
tonight.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm sorry, Councilor Olbert, I see your hand there. Question?
Yes, hang on.
Councilor Wolb?
Sorry, I'm having some computer problems. I really apologize. Roy, I have a question about this. This has been on my mind with COVID. I mean, we don't have to answer it tonight, but I am concerned about things like bike share now, just because before we didn't think twice about it. And now as I drive by those, I get excited to see them. And then I go, oh, that's, you know, what are they doing? So I just, as we work forward on that, I know that you'll probably address that, but I just wanted to say that's been one of the things on my mind about that.
It's a very good question, and I'll definitely look into what's required. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Denise?
Just a couple of things. Yesterday was International Firefighters Recognition Day. And just want to recognize all of our firefighters and the volunteers and all that they do for our communities. So shout out to the firefighters. I will say I missed the day. There's lots of days and I missed this one. And so we will have an article in the paper next week, but just want to recognize our firefighters and all the volunteers. They're amazing. Also, by the weekly update, we look like we are going to have, and this was something that Councillor Walbrook brought to our attention, is having a blood drive in July for our whole community. So depending on how everything goes with COVID-19, we're trying to get that in place in the July timeframe. So I wanted to go from there. And then regarding the incline, I want to say Councillor Shada sends Roy and I pictures and text and emails, you know, this sign has been down, or this has been down, or here's this, or here's that. And it really helps us so that we can go up and we can fix that, or we can say, oh man, and you saw there were probably how many, Councillor Shada, 5 or 6 signs torn down, moved, everything. So we were able to find another way to put them up. And so we appreciate that feedback because it really does help us as we move forward. I talked to Councillor Chandler briefly on Sunday night going, she was up there and she saw him again. And so thought all night, how do we do it? So we thought of an ambassador program now that we have people up there trying to use that and try to do it through education. It seems to be working. Today's was like 64, I think. So we're getting fewer and fewer. We're working with the incline. So I appreciate that you feed back to me, because when you send it to Roy and I, if I'm out, Roy sees it. If Roy's out, sees it. Both of us really can look and see what we can do and move forward as quickly as we can. So thanks for that.
Thanks. Anything else?
I'm trying to think if there was something else I forgot to mention. The weekly update, I think, had most of the information. I followed up on all the agenda items from last week, and I tried to put those in there. I think that's it. I don't really have anything that you guys want me to take care of except for Nancy. I know you asked me to talk about correspondence, so I did send that out to CML to see how others do it and their best practice, because I don't know that. I also asked Judy to put it on the city clerk's website listserv to see what they say, and then we will provide that feedback to you as we move forward. I do need direction. Does everybody want those comments to go to City of Colorado Springs? Because I need that direction regarding the incline, and I need it from all of you. Is what do you think that's the right direction to go?
Councillor Wolf?
I think it depends on, for me, the answer depends on where you would send it. I would just want to make sure, if we're going to bother to do that, that we send it to the right person. And that whoever we send it to, you know, understands it may be helpful for them to forward it to their, you know, supervisor or next person in command. But so long as we know where it's going, I think that would be helpful. And I would suggest, if it is forwarded, that you also copy the author of the original email on it, so the author understands that you're forwarding it, whether it's to John Suthers or to the guy in charge of Parks and Rec or whomever, so they know where their letters or their emails are going. But yeah, I'd like to know who in the city of Colorado Springs you would send it to. Do you have a suggestion?
Roy, who do you think that should go to? Do you think it should go to Karen, or do you think it should go, where do you think that should go?
I think Karen and Kurt, Schroeder, they've been working with us and talking with us, and they're the ones looking at this information, and then they talk to the mayor and all that. So I think that would be a good place to send it.
Okay. Good. Julie.
Who's Karen and Kurt, Roy? Who can you tell me what, not their last names necessarily, but
Yes.
their job role with the city?
Karen is the Park and Rec Director, and then the other one is the Parks Maintenance Director.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that concludes this meeting.
Mayor, I just need to make sure, does everybody agree with that? Is that a consensus? If you just shake your head, so I get that that's a consensus that you want us to send that to the city of Colorado Springs, that would be great.
We can raise our hands. All in favor of forwarding correspondence to Karen Paulus and to Kurt Schroeder at Colorado Springs Parks. Okay.
Okay, so all those comments that we've seen, if I don't know if I have all of them, but if we have all of them, we'll go ahead and forward those and make sure that we copy the author on that.
Okay. Councilor Chandler?
I do have one more question. Has anybody been fined on the incline?
Not at this point, no.
Councilor Wolf?
Thank you. I have a question of Denise and Roy. So just to clarify, what I'm hearing is that Mayor John is saying that we're not team players if we contact staff. And then I'm hearing from Denise that in fact, it's very helpful when we contact staff, not to quote unquote direct them, but to show them things we think they might want to see. Because, you know, with a limited police force, we've been told over and over again, and by our code enforcement guy, over and over again, I can't be everywhere. You, the public, have to notify us when there's a problem so we can do something about it. We can't be eyes and ears on every block at all times. So I'm getting mixed messages. I'm hearing from Denise that, oh, thank goodness, and from Kai and from the police, thank goodness you help us by reporting things. And I'm hearing from the mayor, shame on you all for not being good team players, for notifying staff. So I'm asking, is that just the way we're going to leave it?
I think the best way, Councilor Wolf, is if you send it to Roy and I, then we'll take it and say, okay, here we go. Because like the signs, when Councilor Shada gave it to us, we would call real quick and say, okay, this isn't working. How are we going to manage it? What are we going to do? And when can we get them back up? So it allows us to manage that and figure out how to get it to take care of it and move forward. So that helps. I will say that helps us tremendously as we manage. When can we get the next sign up? And, you know, I'll ask Councilor Shada sometimes, you know, it was up at this time. When did you see it was down? So it helps us figure out when this is happening. And then we can then take that to staff and figure out how to move forward.
Thank you.
You bet.
Okay. Well, I think that covers everything.
Mayor?
Oh, Susan has her hand up.
Goldberg has her hand up.
Judith? I'm sorry, who?
It's
Councilor
Susan.
Holbrook.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's here on my screen. I'm sorry, Susan. I couldn't
That's
see you.
okay. That's okay. I know we're tired. We want to go home. I have two quick comments. One, I just want to reinforce that I've had good success with reporting to Denise and or Roy. And that allows them to do what they need to do. And it keeps me out of that zone that's uncomfortable. And I just, you know, I can't not let this go. I know there's real frustration about the incline and the lack of fines and the lack of tickets and apparently the lack of jail time too. I'm concerned about this because 91% is not a bad number. And if you want that extra 9 or 10%, I understand that. And I think COVID is a rough time. Where do we draw the line? Do we start breaking families apart and throwing them in jail because we don't know they're a family and they're not walking 6 feet apart? I also don't want to lose any lives over this. I don't want to lose lives over enforcing this 9%. I also don't want our first responders to get COVID because they're going to get in a scuffle with somebody who might be an asymptomatic carrier. I mean, this is uncharted territory, and I just can't leave this meeting tonight. I understand the passion of my fellow counselors. I can see it on your faces. I can hear it in your voices. I know that you want to solve this problem. But if we can, you know, even if you and I can just have a talk so we can talk this out, it's 9 to 10% of the numbers that we normally see. And I'm concerned that we're going to try to risk too much and go too far and that we're going to regret it. And I may be wrong about that, but I'm a little concerned tonight leaving this meeting like this, feeling that because I don't know where we draw the line and what risk is too much. And that scares me a little bit, not just for myself, but for my entire community. Thanks for letting me say that.
Great. Well, thank you. Okay, I think we've covered everything. So that said, this meeting's adjourned. Y'all have a good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.